comes from the book of Acts. You know that we've been looking at Acts since Easter, and some of the ways that the apostles were sent out to do the good works. Luke is the primary author of the book of Acts, and there are some sections that are contributed, we think, by other authors, but Luke is the primary writer. And so he's always about the details. So, in Joppa, there was a disciple named Tabitha, and in Greek, her name is Dorcas. She was always doing good and helping the poor. About that time, she became sick and died, and her body was washed and placed in an upstairs room. Lydda was near Joppa. So when the disciples heard that Peter was in Lydda, they sent 2 men to him and urged him, "Please come at once." Peter went with them, and when he arrived, he was taken upstairs to the room. All the widows stood around him, crying and showing him the robes and other clothing that Dorcas had made while she was still with them. Peter sent them all out of the room. Then he got down on his knees and prayed. Turning toward the dead woman, he said, "Tabitha, get up." She opened her eyes, and seeing Peter, she sat up. He took her by the hand and helped her to her feet. And he called for the believers, especially the widows, and presented her to them alive. This became known all over Joppa, and many people believed in the Lord. Peter stayed in Joppa for some time with a tanner named Simon. From the book of Acts, chapter 9, verses 36 through 43. As your pastor, I have a great honor that is bestowed on me, and I'm invited to be with people during some of the most challenging times of their life. Their hospital stays and surgeries and life transitions like moving. And especially is blessed for me is the time when I get to spend with someone on their last days in earth. Now, all of these times can be stressful, and it's not just for the person, but for the families too. So the role of the pastor is to provide some kind of a calm focus for the spirit, and not only to lift prayers and blessings, but to also share a sense of hopefulness. The most amazing journey, especially in our last end-of-life transition. That amazing journey is about to begin. And sharing these sacred moments is really a blessing for me. Now, sometimes I receive a call after a person has already passed. So the need for comfort is still there, but the focus is very different. When someone is important to us and they die, we lose a piece of ourselves, don't we? It doesn't matter if the person had been sick for a long time, if they had lived more than 100 years, like Jerry Wyburn, who passed this spring, or if, like Wyatt Buckles, their life had just started, and he passed at 43 days. For those who remain, real grief is painful. But it was not unusual for Peter to be called by the family of Tabitha, or Dorcas, as Luke calls. It's important to understand a couple of things. Lydda is the city on the right there in the red circle. Lydda, where Peter was, is 12 miles from Joppa, which is on the coast. So the messengers would have had to they would have probably run, but they would have walked or run to Joppa and then returned with Peter. The trip, because probably those people were all in better shape than anybody here. That they could have done that in maybe 6 to 8 hours, I would think. So it would have been, a tough day. It would have been that's pretty rugged country right there. Well, Peter was urged to hurry to arrive before the burial so he could bless Tabitha's body and perhaps offer some prayers before she was laid to rest. Luke uses the word disciple for Tabitha, and it's really interesting because this is the only place in the New Testament that the feminine form of disciple is used. So we get the idea that this is a very special woman. Now, Tabitha also means gazelle. It could be another way of saying graceful. But nowhere in this story do we hear anybody asking Peter to raise Dorcas from the dead. This woman of great generosity to the disadvantaged. We don't know if she's single or married or widowed. We don't know if she has any children. The only thing that we know about her is this remarkable giving spirit. The other women are all grieving at the death of their friend, the sister in faith. This woman of great caring. So Peter clears the room and he prays and he speaks to Tabitha and he says, tells her to get up. He would have spoken in Aramaic, Tabitha kumai. Jesus spoke a very similar command when he raised the little girl from the dead, saying, Talitha kumai. And that means little girl, get up. But let's think about this woman in this story. What's so special about Tabitha? What did she do to warrant resurrection? I mean, it's true she was a very good person, but aren't there a lot of good people? There would have been a lot of good people who died that Peter was not summoned for, and Peter was not going to raise up. We all know a lot of people who have died. Good people. And of course, even after this miracle, Tabitha would have died again, right? But Luke makes a point to talk about Tabitha's ministry to the poor, particularly to the widows that she served. And then the women tell their stories. Isn't that what we do? We get when we come to a visitation or a funeral. We tell stories about the person. We share how that person meant something to us. We relate what was special about that person. So in remembering Tabitha, they would have remembered her craft. And they showed Peter the impact that she made by displaying the clothing that she had lovingly made for them. And through their tears, we understand how much Tabitha means to them. The friend who made the robes they are wearing, she was gone. All right, let's step away from this story for just a minute and into our current timeline. I want you to think about a person who created something special for you. Maybe with their own hands. But what made it special? Was it the gift itself, or was it your appreciation for the work that went into it? Or maybe it's something deep and abiding that you hold in your heart. My mom used to make me these slippers with the big fuzzy balls. I love those slippers. And that shawl around my daughter Madeline is quite skilled with knitting needles, and she made me this blanket. So when I wear those slippers or I put that blanket around my shoulders, I'm not only warmed and comforted, but I'm wrapped in the love of my mother and my daughter. And they gave their time to make something really special for me. And it doesn't always have to be a thing. In 2012, on Mother's Day, my two daughters and I played a handbell trio for our church service. It's a 3-minute song, right? We spent hours practicing. And of course we had to go shopping so we could buy matching shirts, right? Do you know what a blessing that was? What a gift that was. That was something my kids gave their time so we could do something unique and special, and we could praise God. How about that? And of course, when my mother was nearing her end, I sat with her and I sang the songs that she loved, the hymns. Well with my soul. I held her hand and combed her hair, and I comforted her as much as I could, and that all became a sacred space. And that time we had together was a gift to me of the most beautiful memories I have of my mom. I pray that everyone has a special time or a special gift or a special thing that you can recall, and it lifts up your spirit, no matter where you are. Maybe it is a gift that you received from somebody, or maybe it's just an exchange that you have with your mother or someone special. Maybe it's a friend like Tabitha. Because in these exchanges, we have the opportunity to share and show love as Christ did. Okay, back to Tabitha. An ordinary woman, right? But she obviously believed that following the way meant that you live differently. She knew that as a follower of the way, you gave to those who were in need, even if it meant you needed to sacrifice to make that possible. And you put your heart and soul into making the world a better place, so that the people who benefited from your love were really genuinely moved by your love. Now, if she had lived today, I think Tabitha would have been a church basement lady. Have any of you seen these plays, the church basement ladies? Okay, so they're funny, right? Okay, it's about a group of women who, they're Lutheran women in Minnesota, and the whole thing is staged in the kitchen of the church. And it's about the events that are happening there and the way that these women interact with each other's lives. They generally put on the church events and solve the world problems all at the same time. And you really have to have a little bit of background in the Norwegian farming community to get some of the jokes that are kind of subtle, but it's tremendous. Overall, though, we learn about the pulse and the love of a church. It happens around the kitchen stove. It happens where the faithful are selflessly serving others. And the caring for others is the real ministry of the shared meal. Yeah, I think Tabitha would have been right there. She would have made the aprons. She would have made casseroles or hot dishes, depending on what part of the country you come from. She would have had pans of magic cookie bars. Oh, yeah. She would have provided a comforting hug, a shoulder to cry on, the listening ear, and the gentle words of advice. And, of course, the secret ingredient to making everything taste better, which, of course, is love. Because that's what church ladies do. They care for and about each other, and they provide little and big miracles along the way. They're the emotional and the spiritual glue that has the power to uplift the tired and uplift the disadvantaged in the church. And the advantaged. All right, last week we heard about Ananias. Ordinary, faithful guy who was called to heal Saul. We have no understanding that Ananias was anything but a faithful person. He was not a healer. He was not a miracle worker. No other miracles under his belt. No. And here's Tabitha, just another ordinary person living a sincere life of faith. This is important. Ordinary people are not ordinary to God. Right? Tabithas of the world, the church ladies, the ordinary and miraculous people who change lives. These are the beating heart of God. Now, in the early church and today, it's people like Ananias and people like Tabitha who represent the new reality of God's kingdom. It's not really a surprise, is it? I mean, after all, what's more miraculous? That God brought a common fisherman to be the instrument to raise a woman from the dead? Or that God uses ordinary, boring people to further his kingdom? To show people what it's really like when we figure out that living differently changes the world. The movement Jesus started is all about how God uses ordinary people who are not ordinary to God to live extraordinary lives. And that's miraculous. Fishermen become disciples who preach to the most powerful people in the world. A simple man heals the blindness of the most influential apostle in all of history, and the dedication of a selfless seamstress, I really should have written that differently, helps others become a witness and an example to grow the faith. Jesus still needs miracle workers today. Jesus has a miracle to perform today and tomorrow. Are you ready for a miracle? Are you ready to be a miracle? because you know what? God's got a miracle for each one of us. Amen? Amen. Let's have our